was the international organizations connected with the New Age movement. Actually, the New Age is simply really a glittery term for occult. And I was very interested and fascinated in the fact that there were international globalist organizations. And of course, I'm sure you know many of these because you've done a tremendous job in researching yourself. And I have to tell you, your book, Beyond the Pale Horse, and many of the things you're doing certainly seem to correlate. And I would have to, I'm going to have to endorse much of what you've been doing because these are the same things that I've been finding in my own research. But what I found was that when you look at the religious and the occult world, really there is an occult clique of men and women involved in a conspiracy to take over this planet and to impose their own controls, standards on the rest of humanity. This was an interesting discovery, but what I found was that the folks who had been warning us for some years about such groups as the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, and such groups as that, I found that there were definite ties with the New Age globalist organizations. And in fact, whenever you really look behind the scenes and you unravel the money connection, in other words, who is funding all of this, I found that the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Fed Reserve chairman, the larger Wall Street brokerage firms, all of these groups were behind most of the isms that we've studied and known about this century, whether it was Nazism, fascism, or communism, and then the New Age movement, the United Nations organization's establishment, and now we have a number of areas. It absolutely floored me that this was a political, a religious, and an economic conspiracy, and that the same men who seemingly on the surface, we were discussing this before this program, Bill, seemingly would be capitalists, bankers and such, international financiers, but these men are behind all of these various groups, and yet there are, no doubt, I've never bothered to count them all, but certainly if we put it on a computer and calculate it, we would find that there are probably 50 to 100,000 front organizations around the world that have been founded by the same group of men over the years. And yet these front groups operate all in tandem. And it's just an amazing thing that's going on about us. And, of course, the media are involved too, education, medicine. This touches every part of our lives. So people out there who might be saying, well, I don't know how this is going to impact on me. Let me tell you something. It's found at the White House. It's going to be found at the largest law firms in America. It's going to be found on your television screen. Your life is unavoidably controlled by the same small clique of men. So I guess, Bill, the thing, I've taken a long time to say this, but people need to know because their lives, from the moment they wake up to the time they hit the sack at night, is affected. And as you know, I've written a number of books about this. I wrote Dark Secrets of the New Age. It was the #1 Christian bestseller. Mystery Mark of the New Age. I wrote Ravaged by the New Age, so I did a big job exposing the New Age. Then I wrote Millennium, Peace Promises and the Day They Take Our Money Away, a book called America Shattered. And then my newest book is called Dark Majesty, The Secret Brotherhood and the Magic of 1,000 Points of Light.
It's amazing that the title of your book is Dark Majesty, and you're writing about the magic of this occult organization and who they are and what they are. And one of the things that I exposed in the UFO, so-called UFO community, was this revelation of what they call the Eisenhower briefing documents, which was Operation Majestic 12. And the 12, of course, pops up all over the occult as the Zodiac. And then the Majesty, of course, is Lucifer. And this was supposedly classified top secret / magic. And while I was attached to the Office of Naval Intelligence, I also saw another version of this called Operation Majority, top secret / magic, containing the same information, but with different project names. And what I've discovered is that all of this is being promulgated to control the collective consciousness of all of us and make us perceive that there's an enemy to this earth from outer space that does not exist. And that these people are promulgating this, and that all of it, everything that there is to know about any of these things, is coming from a lot of different areas and directly from these same groups and these same people. And what you've described in your initial introduction there is the Masonic credo, which is of the 33rd degree, Ordo ab Chaos. If they control all these different organizations, which even from any viewpoint seem to be opposing each other, but at the top they're really controlled by the same people. For instance, you were talking about an article you have. Why don't we go into that? I think this is a good time to do that.
Sure, because the article is about Nelson Mandela. The most interesting thing is that most people believe that if you're a banker or you're an oil company executive, for example, or savings and loan chieftain, that obviously you're going to take the sort of the National Association of Manufacturers view. You'll be a capitalist, and you certainly would be opposed to communism, socialism. But the interesting thing about this article is, and it's, by the way, it's New York Newsday, July 6th, 1993, page 15.
And by the way, folks, I have that same article in front of me, so we're talking about the same thing. Go ahead, Ted.
I like the title of the article, Bill. It's Dining for Dollars.
Right.
Dining for Dollars. And it's written by Delay Alojid, the United Nations correspondent for New York Newsday newspaper. And it mentions that David Rockefeller and 75 well-heeled friends had Nelson Mandela over to dinner at the Rockefeller Plaza in Manhattan. And, of course, they claim here at least $250,000. It's just that one dinner for the backers of Mandela's African National Congress. The interesting, by the way, there are many, it said here it was a who's who of corporate and business leaders.
Isn't that amazing?
It is indeed. And, by the way, there was also the American Jewish Committee that recognized Mandela for his so-called contribution to human rights. But Thabo Mbeki, the African National Congress's Secretary of Foreign Affairs, who accompanied Mandela, stated that David Rockefeller, former chairman of Chase Manhattan, the founder of the Trilateral Commission, and on, as you know, said that Rockefeller had been backing Mandela and the African National Congress financially for more than a decade. And I quote him, he said, he's a friend we've been in touch with a long time. Now, the fascinating thing about this is that Mandela is a communist. This is a communist group. Now, once you understand this, then you know why the media have all been backing Nelson Mandela and have made him into an international hero. Because the Rockefeller, the same interest, the Illuminati interest, control our media. So then naturally they're going to make sure that Nelson Mandela becomes the hero over in South Africa, and all of this, of course, was stated. Interesting thing is, how is it possible that Rockefeller could have been backing Mandela, a communist, for years, in fact, for more than a decade, even when he was in a prison cell? Even when he was in a prison cell, having been convicted of terrorist acts, Rockefeller and the boys, so to speak, were giving these guys big bucks. And now, of course, the bucks are going to pay off because Mandela is in their camp. He's obviously controlled by them from the very beginning. I think it's interesting, though, how is it possible that Rockefeller, who must, surely, Bill, I'm sort of chuckling when I say this, must be a capitalist. he must be, the whitest of the conservatives who detest blacks. I mean, surely he's one of those bigoted corporate types. That are in it for nothing but the money. And why would he be involved with Mandela and backing the Communist Party over there all these years? And the answer, of course, comes, we understand very well that communism has always been backed. In fact, it was fomented in the very first place by the Rockefeller interest here in the United States. This, of course, has terrific implications for the gold markets in South Africa. It's such a gigantic producer of gold, physical gold, that is. It appears to be a put-up job for a long time now. The things that we've been seeing going on in many parts of Africa, and particularly South Africa.
Now, most people out there would be shaking their heads and saying, how can this be, and what does this mean? If they've been listening to my show, they heard me read off almost the entire membership of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission about a week ago. And, of course, I made the point that Rockefeller is the Director Emeritus of both the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations, and is one of the big players with the Bilderberg Group, which is the overseer on an international level. Now, we know that Rockefeller has been involved in a lot of things. He helped through various banking firms, along with George Bush's father, to finance Hitler's rise to power, the Rockefeller family I'm talking about. Back when the Bolshevik Revolution was taking place, large sums of money were funneled from New York and London to back the communist takeover of what was then Russia and what later became the Soviet Union. And we also know that Rockefeller is responsible for the initial business deals that made Ross Perot a multi-billionaire. And now Ross Perot is calling for a constitutional convention to change our Constitution and says it doesn't work.
That's an interesting thing. And, of course, Rockefeller was responsible for what's been called the New States Constitution. He wants to give us the Constitution. And as you just mentioned, you said something there that I think, I hope that didn't go over people's head. I'm sure it didn't. The folks that listened to you and really understand what you've been talking about for many months now. But the fact that the Rockefeller interest made Ross Perot what he is today, for the most part. Now, there are others who gave Perot contracts, Frito-Lay and others. But you and I know about Nelson Rockefeller as governor of the state of New York, giving the first, you might say billion with a capital B, $1 billion contract to the tiny little company down in Texas headed up by Ross Perot. And you know, you don't do that if you're a scion of New York State. I mean, that's a state eaten up by political interest, by the mafia and so forth. You don't go out of state to give $1 billion contract to an unknown little Texan boy.
That's correct. And there was
back in the 60s.
That's right. And
Nelson Rockefeller did, didn't he?
And it even goes farther than that. There was only one bid submitted for that contract, and it was submitted by Ross Perot, and there were no competing bids, which is absolutely impossible unless the whole thing was rigged from the beginning. So we know that Ross Perot got his start and literally owes everything that he has become to the Rockefeller family. And what he is doing now is acting as another front for the Rockefeller interests in creating chaos in this country to bring it to its knees.
It certainly appears that way. I think the most fascinating thing as a Texan, being here in the capital of the state of Texas, in Austin, Texas, and started having my pulse even on state politics and knowing what some of the richest men in the state of Texas are doing, and they are, as you know, Bill, some of the richest in the world.
That's correct.
Here in Texas, but it's very fascinating. In the Dallas-Fort Worth newspaper just a few months ago was just an interesting article about Ross Perot Jr. Here's what is happening. Ross Perot Jr. is a pretty astute businessman like his dad, Ross Perot Sr. Both of them together have gone in and they have a company called Alliance Development up in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. They put as a minimum of $250 million of their money into this. Now, the biggest thing that this Alliance Development is going to be involved in is development down in Mexico and in Central and South America as soon as NAFTA is approved. And not only that, but Ross Perot Jr., Ross Perot's son, who supposedly ostensibly is the head of this company, but according to the paper, Ross Perot Sr. has at least a 20% interest financially in it.
That's correct. And traditionally, all it takes to control a corporation is a 5% interest.
isn't it fascinating that Ross Perot Jr. It was unmasked there in the Dallas-Fort Worth newspapers, has been working behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. with certain federal bureaucrats and agencies to make sure that NAFTA goes through so that he can be tremendously, or he and his dad can be tremendously enriched. At the same time, old Ross Perot Sr. is going before Congress and saying, oh, no, we can't have NAFTA. Don't you hear that sucking sound? That's all those jobs being sucked out down to Mexico. The fact is that he's going to become a billionaire over and over and over again as soon as NAFTA gets approved, and his own son is working for NAFTA to go through. So, it's these people are so two-faced, it's absolutely incredible.
Well, they are two-faced, but it's something a little more than that. I've discovered a pattern through the years, going way, way back, in which they create a situation, and they control both sides of the situation, and they bring this into a clash or a conflict, these two sides with each other. While they're controlling both sides, and if they're controlling both sides, they can, in fact, control the outcome. And one of their major ploys is the old magician's trick. He'll hold up something and flash something with his right hand while what's really happening is happening in his left hand.
That's true, Larry. One of the things that I think is people really need to understand right now, because there's so many people, Bill, that say, well, what does this all have to do with religion, though, with spiritual things? I don't get the spiritual connection. Now, if they would read your book, they would probably, a light bulb would go off in their head. If they listen to your program here on WWCR. If I can possibly give people a little insight to a fantastic event that is going to take place in August, late August, in Chicago that is connected with Rockefeller, I think they would begin to see the picture. And it will also relate to what you just talked about, the Hegelian dialectic.
Right.
The really setting up both the thesis and the antithesis, and then later coming, of course, and putting them together with what has been called the synthesis. But basically controlling both sides of an issue. And therefore you make sure it's going to come out, the end result, exactly the way you want, since you control both sides. Well, one of the men who has probably been called the giant of the world's Christianity, certainly in America, for decades now, is Billy Graham. Now, we can talk about Billy Graham and some of his very weird and odd connections with the Illuminati, but that would probably take another program or two. But let me just say that right now, there are certain interests that have chosen the new Billy Graham. Billy Graham is getting a little older. He's been quite ill lately. He's been a victim of a few accidents. He fell in his bathtub. He's got some evidence of Parkinson's disease. He's getting up in age, so they need a replacement. So there are certain interests that have chosen already. There is a new man already chosen to take this role to lead the Christian community into toward at least the 21st century. That man is Chuck Colson.
And he has quite a history, doesn't he?
He does have quite a history. He was a lobbyist, grew wealthy by becoming a lobbyist for Investor Diversified Services. You may remember that crooked outfit back in the early 70s. And then, of course, he was convicted in the Watergate scandal and sent up to prison, federal prison for a while. But then he said he was born again as a Christian. So the Christian community, there is one very strong trait about Christians, and that is they're willing to forgive and forget. And so they believe this man, Chuck Colson, when he said, hey, I'm born again. And he's become a star now in the Christian world. And everybody, again, there are some things that would deserve, let's just say, very careful investigation. Why it is that all at once Chuck Colson is getting the most incredible build-up of any man in history except Billy Graham.
Hold that thought, Tex.
For example, he's been keynote speaker at the religious broadcasters, the National Religious Broadcasters, National Convention. He's been at the National Association of Evangelicals. He's a star constantly on the radio programs of such groups as Beverly LaHaye's Concerned Women for America, James Dobson, Focus on the Family, The Christian Research Institute, a group that's supposed to be exposing things out in California, exposing cults and such, they just had Colson on the front cover of their magazine. The Christian Booksellers Association has constantly been inviting Colson to be their keynote speaker at their big annual convention for all of the Christian publishers and booksellers. So this man has the biggest buildup I've ever seen. And, of course, the largest Christian publishers are taking his books and they're spending millions of dollars to make him a star. And then all of a sudden, so I sort of saw the buildup coming there, Bill, and I began to follow it very closely. Now, about 3 years ago, I began to investigate also an event coming up this August 25 through September the 4th in Chicago called the Parliament of World Religions.
And every time this parliament meets, strange things happen, don't they?
Well, they do indeed. Of course, the Dalai Lama of Tibetan Buddhism will be there. All of the world's greatest spiritual leaders will be there. Most of them, I should state. Hindu gurus. I mean, out the kazoo, they'll all be there en masse. There will be witches, Satan worshippers, African shamans, snake handlers from Togo. There will be Santeria, voodoo people from Benin and from Haiti. There will be the Luciferian people of the Freemasonic groups, secret societies. There will also be Joan Campbell, who's executive director of the National Council of Churches. The World Council of Churches will send representatives there. The World Muslim Congress will be there. So there will only be really 3 groups that won't be there that have refused to go. One is Christian fundamentalists. The second is Islamic fundamentalists. The third is Jewish Orthodox folks. They won't be there.
And those are the 3 primary groups that are scheduled for complete elimination and destruction when the New World Order comes into being.
How fascinating, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people get the Jewish thing very mixed up, but you have to understand that the Jewish community is not at all unified. And there are the Orthodox Jews, as you know, Bill, and then there's the Reform Jews. There's many variations in
there are the Babylonian Talmudic Jews and so on. And it's just like any other race or religion. It is fractured. And whenever people tell me that all blacks are bad and we should send them all back to Africa, they're wrong. And when they tell me that the Jews are taking over the world and the Jews are responsible for all of our problems, they're wrong. And when they tell me that the Aryans, the Germanic races, and the Celts and the Anglo files are the ones who are controlling the world and are the true Israelites, I have to tell them they're wrong. You've all got a perverted picture of what's really truly happening. It's elements of all of these groups who believe in a God named Lucifer.
That is exactly right. I like what you said, elements of all of these groups. So if a person says, well, hey, wait, it's the Jews. Well, of course, there's some Jews involved, and many Jewish groups involved. We know about, of course, the shenanigans of the Anti-Defamation League and such. There's no doubt about that. I mean, that basically is a anti-American, totally ungodly group that's been spying on Americans for many years. Very evil group, but that doesn't mean that that every Jewish group is like that at all. So we have to be very, very careful. I totally agree with you. And at the same time, such people as Carol Quigley of Georgetown University, who was Bill Clinton's mentor, tried to get everybody turned on, as you just well stated, to the Anglophile network.
That's correct.
So, what they'll do is have you dancing, tap dancing, going this way and that way, and they'll sashay you around until you lose the big picture entirely. And then they'll be able to tag you as an anti-Semite or as a Jew who hates Gentiles. So people should be very careful that they're not tagged. And yet there's an element of truth that in many of these groups, they are part of a conspiracy. So you have to be very careful not to be drawn into one way or another too rapidly.
That's correct. And everyone has to remember that they can't make the conspiracy work unless they can create opposing sides, create a conflict, control both sides, and then create the clash or the actual confrontation between the two. And I can see it happening all over America. They take you into a cul-de-sac with the POW issue, and you spin round and round on the merry-go-round, and you really don't understand what you should be concentrating on. You get all wrapped up in what happened in Idaho or in Waco instead of looking at the whole picture and how this fits into the whole picture. And so you spin round and round, and in the meantime, while we're all being led to and fro by these people, and believe me, most of the organizations in the patriot community, when you go to the very top and find out where the money comes from and who the leaders are, you'll generally find a connection to Freemasonic lodges or to other things, and you'll find if you follow the money trail, like with Perot, it leads to the Rockefellers or other members of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. And my message has always been, and I know it's yours also, Tex, is that we have to step back, and we have to quit getting caught up in these little eddies and whirlpools on the side of the river. And we have to figure out where the current's really going and figure out whether we need to build a dam or divert the river or what we have to do here, because we're going to have chains put around our ankles very shortly if we don't get smart.
Well, we absolutely are, I'm afraid. And, of course, the amazing thing is all of the things that you talked about there, that you mentioned, from the Waco tragedy to the Randy Weaver and many others, they are all connected. But again, if you just look at one link of a chain, you probably don't understand that you're in bondage.
That's right.
You're just looking at one little link and you're saying, that's not holding me. You don't understand that it's tied to 1,000 others, and that your body is totally enmeshed in chains. Well, we were talking about this Parliament of World Religions. What I found out that this really astonishing event, the Parliament of World Religions, that will be held in Chicago this August, that there is a connection with Chuck Colson, because Chuck Colson has been chosen for a special prize. It's called the Sir John S. Templeton Prize for Progress and Religion. Now, he's been given $1 million prize. And he is going to be recognized and will be a keynote speaker at the Parliament of World Religions. Now, this is the interesting thing, is that Mr. Colson has been put forward by these groups, some of them very strange groups and yet very powerful, supposedly Christian right-wing groups, Christian right groups, everybody from the Christian Coalition of Pat Robertson, and so I've already mentioned some of them: Christian Booksellers Association, the NAE, the National Association of Evangelicals, the Religious Broadcasters, which is called the NRB, etc. All of the major Christian organizations have made Chuck Colson a star, and after that, after he's been catapulted to become the new Billy Graham's Billy replacement, suddenly he's given $1 million prize selected for it, and he's being packed off to go be a speaker for the Parliament of World Religions. Now, I began to look at this very carefully to see whether Mr. Colson, from the very first, was set in place, the motion was set in place so that he would get to where he's at today. What I found is that the Parliament of World Religions is funded almost entirely by Rockefeller interest. There is a strange organization called the Institute for 21st Century Policy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this group on the board of directors is a man named Daniel Ibanez, who is a Hindu, an American Hindu, and he is head of the Parliament of World Religions. In its own documentation, the Institute for 21st Century Policy states that it is the major promoter and sponsor of the Parliament of World Religions. Well, then I began to look at the money trail. I wanted to know this institute. I wanted to know where did they get their money. And I found that there were two groups. First was the Rockefeller Foundation. Second was the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. So in other words, it is the Rockefeller people who are sponsoring this. Now, then I contacted Charles Colson's organization, and they were very angry at me for beginning to expose this. And they wrote me a hot letter. It's almost a threatening letter, Bill. And Colson's people, they were very adamant. They said, listen, Mr. Colson is not going to be speaking at the Parliament of World Religions. He's going to be speaking in Chicago at the Rockefeller Chapel at the University of Chicago. Well, I then contacted the Council for a Parliament of World Religions. I found that on the 6th day of proceedings at 8 p.m., the major function, the keynote speaker, will be Mr. Chuck Colson. It will be at the Rockefeller Chapel on the campus of University of Chicago, but it is part of the proceedings, the official proceedings. And following Mr. Colson's ceremony, they will all proceed over to the Palmer House auditorium there in Chicago to be given a concert. So he is part of the official proceedings. And by the way, his people lied. They claimed in a press release that they're sending out to everybody that Tex Mars has fabricated this. They state that Mr. Colson will be at the Rockefeller Chapel the day before the Parliament begins. Well, I have the schedule right here in front of me, the official calendar from the Council for a Parliament of World Religions, and it shows very clearly that he's speaking on the 6th day and is the keynote speaker that night at 8 p.m. Now, it mentions that the Parliament for World Religions will be mainly conducting most of its seminars and such at the Palmer House, but that they will also be using chapels, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples throughout the city of Chicago. So the Rockefeller Chapel is only one of them. Now, the interesting thing is that David Rockefeller has a Ph.D. in economics from the University of Chicago. And, of course, as I recently exposed in my newsletter Flashpoint, he's given many millions of dollars, John D. Rockefeller Sr. did, at least, gave many millions of dollars to the University of Chicago so that they could study, particularly back in the 30s, how, listen to this, using genetics, how to create the new Superman.
And we believe that that's happening right now in secret.
It's happening in secret, but here's Chuck Colson saying, hey, wait, I'm not going to be speaking at the Palmer House like the other keynote speakers. Well, I'm going to be at the Rockefeller Chapel, which, of course, makes it even worse. It just exposes exactly what's happening.
Sure.
By the way, the Catholic Cardinal of Chicago, Cardinal Bernardine, is going to be the presenter of this John S. Templeton Award. Actually, it's already been given to him at Buckingham Palace. Colson's already got it. He's already got his $1 million. His prison fellowship organization has the money. Colson can claim that, he didn't get it personally. His ministry did. And then I found out that at the, you say, well, wait just a minute. Hasn't he, though, stated clearly, hasn't Chuck Colson said that he believes in Jesus? Isn't he a Christian? I mean, isn't he a fundamentalist?
I hope everybody's listening to what you're going to say, because I already know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
Well, what he stated at the press conference, February 17th, 1993, Mr. Colson was asked by the secular press what was Prison Fellowship's policies on proselytizing people of other faiths, such as Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and such. He flat out stated that neither he nor Prison Fellowship believed in proselytizing. Now, I went to Webster's Euclid Dictionary. I looked up proselytizing. It means to convert. So he does not believe in converting people of other faiths. Now, here's the trick of the New Agers. Here's the trick of the occultist. They say it's okay to believe in Jesus. Just don't believe he's the only way to salvation. So this is the trick that they do. You see, in the New Age movement, and by the way, Bill, I wrote a whole book exposing New Age cults and religions by that very title, New Age Cults and Religions. And I stated in the book that there is only, although they have a whole a bunch of guidelines for what would be New Age. I even show the 12 central doctrines or teachings of the New Age movement and its religion in my book. But it all boils down to one when you get to the crux of it, and it is this. It is perfectly acceptable to believe in any God or in any set of scriptures, but it is heresy and totally unacceptable to proclaim that your God or your set of scriptures is unique in any way. So, if you see, one time I was reading about a woman who was channeling what some would say is a demon spirit. in the spirit channeling. And a fundamentalist Christian said, well, the Bible says that Jesus is the only way. And this spirit, speaking through this woman's mouth, said, well, you have your truth and I have my truth, and that's wonderful. In other words, you see, this is the tactic. Now, I have no argument with the fact that Chuck Colson or a Mother Teresa will go to the Parliament of World Religions and say, oh, yes, I believe in Jesus. But then Mother Teresa was asked when she was a missionary to India, did she seek to convert the Hindu to Christianity? And she said, oh, my, no. She says, converting for me is just helping the Hindu to be a better Hindu, or helping the Muslim to be a better Muslim. She said, you do not need to convert. They have their own gods of the Hindus. She said a person must follow the God that is in their own mind. Well, Bill, I have a question here. Now, I'm assuming since Mr. Colson is taking the New Age viewpoint, that even though he says he believes in Jesus, he doesn't believe in proselytizing or converting others to Christianity, that he must agree with Mother Teresa then. And, of course, when you read the Bible, you find that this is absolutely, totally opposite what God's Word says.
That's correct, and it's totally against the words of Christ himself. What I found, Tex, is that I went into the New Age movement as an outsider, and they knew I was an outsider. They knew I didn't believe any of the things that they were teaching, but they knew that I wanted to learn about what was happening with them. And one thing that I found is very common amongst the people in the New Age. They're looking for something to believe in, and they've been disappointed in all of the traditional aspects of religion and society. So they're attracted to the New Age because it offers them something that's non-confrontational, and it promises them such wonderful, beautiful things. And it depends upon what particular aspect of the New Age movement they're interested in. It appeals to the part of all people that says, I don't want to fight with anybody. I want to live a good life. I want to see all the good in everybody. And they lay this out in front of them like a big banquet table. And what they basically teach is that it is okay to believe in Jesus, but that Jesus was not God. Jesus was a great teacher. In fact, he's one of many ascended masters, and Christ is not a person. Christ is an office and can be filled by any of these masters. For instance, when the Christ returns, he will be fulfilling the office of the Christ, but he will be called Maitreya. And on and on and on and on. And, of course, good people who have a good heart, who really want to have a good life and have all of these good things, they look at this banquet and they partake by the handful, by the bucketful, and pretty soon they're trapped. And what they usually find out is that the end result of this trap that they're in is the fleecing of their pocketbook, and they usually end up in divorce, losing their children, and all kinds of terrible things happen to them.
Well, that is exactly right. I remember when we founded our ministry, Living Truth Ministries here in Austin, Texas, some years ago, Bill, and we published the book. Actually, we distributed the book. It was published by a Christian publisher, Dark Secrets of the New Age. I remember one of the first people that came out of the New Age movement and believed in Jesus Christ was a woman right here in Austin, Texas. She had been in charge of the yoga center here in Austin, and she had been following a Hindu woman guru named Guru Maya. And she came to us, and she was totally in tears, and she accepted Jesus Christ. She closed up the yoga center immediately, and then she began to tell me of her life. And I'll tell you, she was 34 years of age, Bill, and it was the most heartbreaking story I'd ever heard up to that time. I've heard some worse and even more tragic since then. But she told me that as a young lady of 18, right out of high school, she got involved in Scientology. She actually went on L. Ron Hubbard's, ship.
Tex, I hate to do this, but I've got to cut you off here. We're out of time.
Folks, I want to thank Mr. Tex Mars for being our very special guest tonight. If you would like to call and get a free newsletter from Tex Mars, call 1-800-234-9673. It's a free newsletter, 1-800-234-9673. 9673. Do it now, 1-800-234-9673. Don't forget to call Swiss America Trading, 1-800-289-2646. That's 1-800-289-2646. Don't wait until it's too late, folks. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's broadcast. We have a special surprise for you tomorrow night. Tex Mars will be back. Good night, and God bless you all.